welcome to The Sacred Journey. The Sacred Journey is the program that reminds you that life is a wonderful adventure and each and every experience we have is a unique and perfect opportunity for learning. I'm Joyce St. Germain, and I am so delighted to have my guest, Diane Cohen, for our show, Art Quilting, One Woman's Journey. And before we talk about art quilting and what this one woman's journey is, I'd like to say that Diane and I were colleagues in the West Hartford Public Schools and have known each other many, many years. And I always knew she was multi-talented and had many gifts. This is one that is just coming to my attention, so I knew I had to share it. So Diane, welcome, and thanks for coming to share one more of your gifts. You are a teacher, an author, a quilter. I remember in our days in school together, you were running a TV club. You did so much with ESOL and ESL. You did so much training of teachers. You just were always so engaged. When I saw these quilts, and as an artist and former art teacher, I was absolutely blown away with how expressive they are. So I'm going to ask you to maybe talk about a little bit about what art quilting is.
Art quilting is something relatively new. Everybody is more familiar with the traditional quilting, which are squares or triangles sewn together to make a massive bed quilt. But art quilting is more for hanging on the walls. It's usually smaller, although it can also be large, and it has more of an independent flair to it. So there are when you're doing a traditional quilt, there are patterns that you follow, and they're pretty strict. Some of them in the Amish country are very strict as what, that particular region. But with art quilting, anything goes, just like in the art world. So for example, if you want to do abstract art, landscape art, more portrait art is coming into being now. So anything that you want to do, you can do in art quilting.
We'll be sharing some of I call them masterpieces. We'll be sharing some of these with our viewers in real time. I literally, we're working on Zoom, so we're doing our best. I literally will hold them up to allow you to talk more carefully about them. And then at the end of our show, viewers will get a chance to really see them in their entirety. So your inspiration was very unique, individual, and very moving. Would you be willing to share that?
Certainly. So my inspiration that I'm working on now has been photographs by Roman Vishniak. Vishniak was a fantastic photographer, and he decided to capture real life, mostly in Poland, and it was in the 1930s. And he was taking pictures in the shtetls. Shtetls are small little villages where the Jewish people lived. And it really related with me because it resonated with me because of my ancestral background. Most of my grandparents came from Poland. So I particularly wanted to put these into quilts and preserve them for the family.
May I show one of one of your interpretations of one of his?
Well, this is not Roman Vishniak.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Bruno Catalano.
All right. Do I have any of his?
I think you do. You have the man with the bread in his hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
This is a new topic for me. So not the bread in the cart.
If you would like me to talk about Bruno's work, I can do that first.
Okay. Would you mind, since I am more?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I was also inspired by Bruno Catalano. Bruno Catalano was born in Italy and moved to France. And he's a very good sculptor. As you can see, his work is outstanding. He works in bronze, and there's a series called The Voyagers, or The Travelers. And he has them all around France in natural settings. And one of the unique things about these statues is there's a part missing. And it really resonated with me because I worked with ESOL students, English as a second language, and my students came from all over the world. And when they started to tell me their stories, one of the things they would say is even though they became more Americanized, they would learn the language and they were comfortable here, there was a part of them missing. And that part was still in their native country. So that's when I saw this particular sculpture, I said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what my students were saying. So I decided to make a quilt. And one of the fascinating things, if you look at it closely, the sky on that particular one, these are new fabrics that are coming out now that they didn't have years ago when the traditional quilts were made. They are hand done, they're hand dyed, they're beautiful fabrics. And with these fabrics, you can do a lot more of the art quilting, I think, give them more depth. So I particularly like that fabric that I used for the sky.
Yeah, and I apologize for the lighting ring that's in the way. And your ancestors did some work with fabric.
Right. My grandfather was a tailor in Poland. And then when he came to the United States in 1909, he became a tailor here. And I was very fortunate that my mother kept a spool that he had on his workbench. And I still have that spool where I keep it on my workbench in my studio as an inspiration. He was unbelievable with fabric. He worked in the garment district. He would make, he would design some clothing, but he would also, if he saw a photograph in a magazine, he could copy that particular fashion to a T. So he was very creative.
I'm going to show both of your workstations, or the work photos of your workstation.
Right, and that was one which I was making a photo, and this was from the Jewish Community Center. They have a large sculpture outside of a shofar, which is a ram's horn, and traditionally blown on the new year for the Jewish people. And I love the style of it and the inspiration of it, and I decided to make a quilt. So the first picture that you showed was my putting the pieces together.
I'm going to turn this light off. This has become annoying. So the artwork is more important than my face.
Oh, no. Yeah, so
I'll
that's
get back to your workstation.
I also have evolved as I started doing it. I find I like putting in shading more. In the beginning, I didn't put any shading in any of my artwork, my quilts. So now I'm adding shading and shadows, and I think it adds more depth to my pieces.
So these are some of the, it's a work in progress. I see.
Right, exactly. Those are some of the tools that I use. Definitely use a ruler. I also use the cutting pieces for, yeah, so.
Okay. I'm going to go back to one of the first ones that you sent me just because it is so cute and so adorable.
Thank you. Oh, that's my granddaughter, by the way.
Oh, she is absolutely
but I don't, the
adorable.
picture's not coming out too clearly, but it was an elephant that I did on a quilt. That was a baby quilt, and that was about, I think 40 by 52, the size of that particular quilt.
Just the sweet little, goodness. I thought this was such a brilliant idea to do it this way, with just the little details on the fabric.
And yes, and each fabric. So if you pick something pink, I love the fact in the store they might have 10 different pinks with different patterns and textures in them. And I love adding the texture to them.
Now, you also have done portraits, landscapes, I'm going to say action pictures, the skiing picture.
Right, that's a landscape one. I thought that was cute. I was for a couple for their wedding, and they love skiing in Colorado. So I decided to do something with a skiing motif for them.
Now the background fabric, the mountains in the background,
that's made of batik fabric, and the shading in it is beautiful.
It really captures what artists hope to capture in paint. well, you're an artist also. I should have said painters hope to capture in paint.
Now, some quilters do add paint to their quilts. I don't do that. And another thing that quilters do, art quilters, is thread painting. And I don't know if I sent you any pictures with that, but that is an interesting process where you use thread as your paint. So you almost cover the whole section of a piece with thread.
But not like embroidery, or like embroidery?
It's with machine. It's machine
Oh.
stitched. Some people do it hand stitched, but most do it. And you see a lot of that done with animals. So if they want to do a bear, or to add that texture, that more depth to the animal, the fur. I did it in one picture. I don't know. I hope I gave you, I'm not sure if I did. The one of the young girl who has the Star of David on her. And that was during the Holocaust. I don't know if I gave you that picture or not, but I did thread painting in her hair.
I don't have that one, but one that I do have that I was mesmerized by.
That's my daughter.
Portrait. Wow.
Yeah, and that is an interesting process too. That process is layering fabric. I would say about 5 different shades of fabric, one on top of the other, and letting the other fabrics seep through. So there's a lot of depth to that one.
So the fabrics are not all opaque then?
Pardon?
The fabrics are not opaque. Some of
They
them
are opaque,
trim pads.
but it's cutting. So you
Oh,
expose the fabric underneath. It's an interesting process.
yeah, we used to do that in art class, a different style, but it's from the Kuna Indians off the coast of Panama. It's called they're called molas, but I've never seen it done like this. That's amazing. And when I look at the detail in the shadow work on the towel on her head, and you said this was on her wedding day, and she had just
Yes, that was on her wedding day. She had just washed her hair, and she put her hair up in a towel, and I took the picture, and then
shadows. Wow, and the
decided to capture
highlight.
it. Yeah,
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. That's a cute one. Yeah, that was a baby quilt. Baby quilts are always fun to do. And it's what I do is more like cartoonish kind of figures, and it's fun. And I've done a few with dogs with books. I always put the book in there. I think I'm a teacher forever. So I add that to each one.
This little outlining work, how is that done?
That's a zigzag stitch. That's on the machine.
Okay, I can't enlarge quite enough. So the line literally, let's say that is going like this all the way down.
Exactly.
All the way over.
A fine zigzag stitch.
And how you did the individual pages.
And that's just also just
kind of hard to see that.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that. Wow.
That's another baby quilt. That was a fun project. This one was a commissioned one. She wanted something with pigs. And so I gave her several choices, and she decided the 3 little pigs she wanted. So that was the one I did for her.
And it's not like you can go into a fabric store and say, excuse me, show me the fabric that has texture of leaves or trees or bricks. You have to search around and interpret on your own.
Right. Thankfully, we have plenty of quilt stores around, and they have a variety of fabric, and it's always fascinating to go in. I have what they call a stash. And the stash is the fabrics that you collect, and hopefully you'll use someday. And it keeps growing, the stash, unfortunately, but hopefully I'll get to all of them one day.
And sometimes you only need a little bit for
Right.
whatever area.
Right.
This one, everything about it, I keep going, oh, wow. And wow. Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow. The leaves, the stone, the clouds, the trees.
This was also a wedding present for someone. They got married in Tuscany. And I had some photographs from Tuscany, and I chose one and decided to do the archway and all. Yeah, so it's sometimes you use very small pieces and you actually use tweezers to put them on and then stitch around them. So it takes quite a bit of time with all the stitching.
The
That's
tile
a
roof.
fabric. Right, that's a particular fabric for the roof.
Wow. So do you still do how you work with fabric traditionally and still have to pin it down, or do you use a little bit like a fabric glue stick to keep it in place? Because I'm
I
thinking,
use a glue stick. Some people use pins. I'm always afraid I'm going to run over the pins and break my needle. So I don't use pinning too much. I use more the fabric. Then you also can use interfacing. You can glue interfacing to the back of the fabric, which will make it a little stiffer and easier to use. And then if you look at the clouds, I stitched around the clouds to make them bellow out a little bit more and give some depth to the picture.
just absolutely beautiful. And you have a natural eye for composition too. So
Oh,
it
thank
really
you.
makes the viewer want to enter the picture visually and travel around. This, I just was like, are you kidding me? We've got wood, we've got stone, we've got bread, we've got a woven basket, we have hair. And the more I look at it, the more I'm just going, wow, wow.
Well, that particular one was done for a gentleman that was in my mother's exercise class. He came to the United States when he was 13 years old. And he told me his story one time, how he was coming here because his parents said his grandfather had a large produce business and was very successful. So he came, and the produce business was a push cart. And he ended up pushing the push cart all over New York, the Lower East Side of New York City. And while he was pushing the push cart, he kept looking down at the ground. And his grandpa said, "What are you looking at?" And he said, "I'm looking for the Medina, the gold." He said he was told that there was gold on the streets of the United States, and he wanted to send it back. But Jack was a nice guy, such a funny guy. And it was just a lovely story. And I wanted to do something special for him. So I made that particular quilt.
The um the worn boards and now this is an art teacher comment. The fact that you used a slightly less intense color for the wheels in the back than the front is brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Instead of making all the wheels the same color black. So you created the illusion of depth, which is really very skillful.
And I did use yarn for her hair to add the texture.
Now, is that loose? Like it
Loose.
would move
It
a
is
little bit?
loose. Yeah.
Okay, so it's just attached at the top. So sweet. Do you just use a regular sewing machine?
Yes.
Okay. This one is so powerful, and many of our viewers may even have seen it and recognize where it is.
Right. That's the one from the Jewish Center. Yeah, that one.
But you captured the way light and highlight and shadow work on metal.
Yeah, I really studied the picture that I took, and that helps. You start to see the details. The more you examine pictures and you look at the shading, it comes together.
For you, it does. A lot of people, maybe not so much, but everything about it is just extraordinary. What can you tell us about this?
That's my three grandsons, my older three grandsons when they were younger. That picture was taken at Sturbridge Village. And we went there one day, and at that time I did not do faces. So this was a great picture for me because it was the back of their heads. Yeah. So it was fun doing that one. And that's fabric. That's actually, the fruit is a piece of, you call it fussy cut. I cut out the pieces of the fabric and added it in there.
And finding the wood grain, but just the subtle little things like, oh, it doesn't translate well, but our viewers will see it at the end of the show. You didn't just use the same color for the leg. You have highlight and you have shadow in the arms, the side of the neck. There's subtle changes of the values, and it's so impressive, Diane, because I would never have thought of fabric being used like this. I know I've been to museums where famous people have a quilt or a fiber piece of artwork made of fiber, but I've never known that there was an actual, you called it a movement, I think.
It is a movement, it is. And it's interesting because I did 2 quilt shows where I curated the quilt shows. And when I was doing them, the first one, I had to convince them at this venue that it was art, because they didn't look upon quilts, only bedding.
Yeah.
And she was the person in charge, was blown away when she saw the quilts.
Well, my experience, my limited experience with quilting has been you get little calico pieces and you put them together and you repeat the shapes and it's very geometric and you repeat the patterns. That was my knowledge, unfortunately, and it was limited. So you've really opened my
It was used to keep people warm. It was basically a real functional product. And we are now at a part where we're like luxury. We're at a different stage where we can say, okay, we can have art on our walls and we don't have to do everything just for use.
Right.
This is a little piece that I did for my grandson's school, their elementary school. And it was their mascot was an owl. And so I did this particular piece for them, and it hangs in the lobby of the school. And this one's called, this particular motif has a name. It's called Attic Windows. So you can see the depth. So you're looking through windows at these little pieces of art inside. So it's kind of an interesting, different way of doing a quilt for me.
It shows
I like experimenting with different different techniques.
Yeah, this shows the perspective of depth, that each thing is going away and the little images are at the back of this little sort of boxed area. Wow.
This is a famous picture. Actually, I copied a famous picture, and it's of immigrants looking at the Statue of Liberty. And I think of my own ancestors coming here, and so many other people think of their ancestors coming here. And that's the first thing they see, and what they must be thinking at that point in time when they see it.
Now, the outline, is that all thread work?
That's all, yeah, that's all stitched with, the zigzag stitch again. Very fine zigzag stitches.
So you didn't find a piece of fabric that had the Statue of Liberty printed on it?
Right, it's stitched. Okay. Well, it was actually, I think there was an outline of the Statue of Liberty, and then I stitched over their outline.
Well, before we end, I'm trying to, I guess this will be the best I can do, and I apologize for my clumsiness with technology, but I am just so mesmerized by this, and we're just about out of time, but I want to ask if you have anything you want to be sure that our viewers know or understand or take away from this show.
I just enjoy this. I enjoy the process of creating, and whether you do it with art, with paint, with pencils, with pieces of paper or fabric, it's just an expression that is just so joyful to be able to do that and to bring joy to people. So I get a kick out of it. And there's no end to the possibilities of what you can do with it, which is also exciting for me.
Yeah.
And I thank you for this opportunity to share it with people.
Oh, it was my pleasure and my honor. And I'm going to throw a little tease out because you are an author. You're going to be coming back on another show to talk about, I think, an incredible idea that you have presented in book form that I don't want to give too much away, but it's going to be so exciting. I can't wait to read it myself and share with our viewers. So thank you again. And
Well, thank you.
thanks for joining us on the Sacred Journey. We'll catch you next time.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!